Hey everybody, welcome to Dedicated Dropouts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Jesse Empey. So, Jesse, welcome to the show. Do you mind telling us a little bit about who you are?
All right. Well, thanks, first of all, Nate, for having me on your podcast. This is pretty cool. My name's Jesse Empey. I was born in Murray, Utah, and grew up in West Jordan in the 80s and went to Bingham High School. I'm a husband, father, grandfather, and a private pilot. I've always been a computer nerd. Just as I started in my first computer was an Atari 800 XL that I had when I was a kid, and I just really love messing around with that. And I'm currently the CTO of WetX.
Excellent. And so as a CTO of WetX, do you mind just elaborating a little bit more on maybe what your day-to-day looks like, how you stumbled into that, just expanding a little bit more on what that means to be the CTO of WetX?
Yeah, so at WetX, it's a small startup. So my day-to-day is filled with a lot of different things. I wear a lot of different hats in that role right now, anywhere from helping with marketing and operations as well, helping to run payroll sometimes. Just with a small startup, you kind of do whatever needs to be done. But I'm definitely the technical guy of the bunch that started the company. But just really grateful for the other two founders that I work with and the expertise that they have in what they do.
Excellent. I imagine it's very different than your experience at some of these larger organizations that you've been at in the past. And maybe we'll get more into that as the show goes on. But just really quickly, a quick gut check here. You're currently at a startup. You've been at larger organizations managing larger teams. What are the pros and cons in your mind? Where do you like the startup life? Where don't you like it? Where do you like the bigger corporate life? Where don't you like it? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I was in corporate life for quite a while. I worked at one company actually for 15 years. And it was a great company to work for. I learned a lot there. I think one of the positives of working in a larger corporation like that, it lets you focus on one aspect of your career and be able to become expert in that area more easily. Where with a startup, you have to be an expert at all kinds of different things, and so you can be really broad in your knowledge, but the depth that you have in those areas is sometimes smaller. But that's why you hire people that are really good, that can have that depth of knowledge that you can rely on as a leader of an organization. The startup life is awesome. It's crazy though, always busy. It's often nerve-wracking, wondering if you're gonna make it as a startup. And so yeah, there's not a lot of similarities between the two. It's a completely different experience, and I like both, but I've really loved starting my own company and being in charge of my own destiny that way. It's been a huge learning experience.
Which I think my experience too, I've worked at both. I'm currently at a larger organization. Started off my career at a startup, was one of the first 20 employees in the Americas, at least, for an educational technology startup here, making 100 cold calls a day, sending 100 cold emails a day, and nobody knew the name of our company. So it wasn't like calling from a big company and saying, "Oh, you've heard of us? Great." Your assessment is pretty accurate, though, based on my own experience as well, right? You just have to be agile and willing to roll with the punches, accept change at smaller organizations. You're able to hone in more to your skill set at a larger one. Which brings me to my next question. We discussed a little bit before we started recording about the term dropout itself, right? Some of the negative connotations associated with that. Would love to hear how you went from being a college dropout to becoming the CTO of WetX. Right? I know that's been a span of many years at this point, but maybe you could first give us your thoughts on the distinction you make between being a dropout and the decisions you made, but then we can dive into maybe how you got where you are today. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. So like you were saying, I don't really feel like I dropped out of school per se. I was going to college and working on my computer science degree. And I got an awesome internship position at a company called Strata Software. And they were creating 3D modeling software for the Macintosh computer before it was the cool computer. The Mac has always been great for creative people, but for like high-end hardware, it wasn't the thing for quite a while. But at that company, I learned a ton, and I could see that I was learning more working in my field than I was at school. So I continued to go to school while I was an intern there. I earned my associate's degree, and I just kept working at that company. And then that position led to another, which led to another, and just kept my nose to the grindstone and worked, and always with a desire to learn new things. And that's what's brought me to where I am now as a CTO of WetX.
That's a great story. Again, pretty similar to my own experience, where I have an associate degree from SLIC, Salt Lake Community College, just in general studies, not in computer science, which is a great, if you're going to get an associate degree, that's a great associate degree to get, computer science. And in no way is this show meant to bash traditional education either. It's just to show alternative routes to a traditional 4-year degree, for example. In your case, what that route was, you started down probably planning on the bachelor's degree in computer science.
Yeah, that's correct.
And this opportunity presented itself halfway through, and from there, or even earlier, and from there, you're able to build a career out of it.
Yeah, and so I finished schooling within my Associates of Science, so it wasn't an actual computer science degree, but
okay.
Yeah, it was a great launching point.
So what's interesting about what you said too is you felt like you were learning more from your on-the-job work than what you had been learning in school. And that reminds me again of my own experience, because when I was considering going back to school, I had started working and was looking at the University of Utah to finish a computer science degree, specifically focused in data science. I would still be finishing that degree today if I had taken that route. That was just about 3 or 4 years ago, and it would have been 5 years for me to finish. And I already had 80 some credits. And that's one of the reasons I started exploring alternative education routes myself. So very, very in line with what you said there, that the work experience has, for you, catapulted your career, right? Basically, you were able to start your career 2-3 years earlier and gain that experience that was very unique to the job itself, as opposed to the schooling.
Yeah, and I would circle back to what you were saying about just how good higher education is, and you're not bashing it. I'm really glad I got my associate's degree. I learned how to learn while I was getting that, and I went to Dixie State College and loved it down there in St. George, and just loved my teachers, and they were great. And it was just a really good opportunity for me to to learn in areas outside of my chosen field of computer science and what I wanted to learn. But yeah, when it came to a 4-year degree in computer science, I felt like I was receiving just more experience and learning more quickly on the job.
Which brings up another great point, which is, sure, a degree from Harvard. I will not bash a degree from Harvard. That's worth its weight in gold, right? That's going to open doors that a degree from Salt Lake Community College just isn't going to open. But starting at a community college or a 2-year school is a really great option that's affordable. For me, it was a way to avoid debt while I figured out what I wanted to do. Still educating myself, still opening the doors to possibilities, but without going into massive student loan debt in the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was able to finish my associate's degree without any debt because of that internship. And at that point, I had a family and kids, and that was that was some hard times back then. Late working hours and doing the homework after that, but it was awesome.
So that brings me to my next question, which is this: what are a few things that you did looking back now? How many years ago was that? Just curious. How long has that been?
Decades, way back in the 1900s.
Back in the 1900s. Well, the late 1900s at least. It
Yes.
was past the midpoint of the 20th century. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, it was probably around 97 to the year 2000.
Okay. So 20 or so years ago, 20, 23 years ago.
Yeah, that's when I graduated. Yeah.
So looking back on that, what are a few things that you did after you decided, hey, I'm not going to pursue a bachelor's degree? What are a few things that you did, habits or goals that you set or people that you met that put you on the path to where you are today?
Well, during that internship, it was a wonderful company that was willing to teach individuals that were working hard. And I feel like that was the difference for me, was the ability to work with wonderful people that were willing to teach. And I followed several of them through my career, moving from company to company, and just had some really great experiences because of the people that I worked with. We put a lot of long hours into our efforts in building software, and just built some really good relationships with them, and I was able to just catapult my career, I feel like, because of that.
Which has been a huge learning for myself as well. That is to say, relationships matter greatly, especially when you don't have 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees after your name. Who you know and how you treat the people in your immediate network can make all the difference. And along with that, finding people that value learning as much as they value education, because learning, especially in the technical field of computer science and software development, I imagine over the last 20 some years, you've had to learn over and over again new tools and frameworks, languages. So finding a group of people that value learning and allowing you to grow within a role, it sounds like that's been a key factor in your success.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And then even as the director of software development at Medici Ventures, where I built a team of over 100 individuals, multiple software development teams, That was one of the things that I always looked for when we were hiring somebody was, is this person willing to learn on their own? Are they doing things outside of work to help them become better at what they do? And are they still excited about being in the computer industry? So that was a big draw for me when I was interviewing people and seeing if they would be a good fit at Medici Ventures.
That's a great point, because you have that perspective as a hiring manager, right? Director of engineering, making these decisions that impact people's livelihoods. What are some specific things that you would look for? You say learning outside of work. Were there any specific things that you would look at in an individual's resume, or as time went on, their LinkedIn profile, that might give you a hint as to their desire to grow? Any insights there that you could share?
As far as their desire to grow, it's hard to see that in someone's resume. Um, so really, I learned that when I was sitting down with them and asking them questions. Um, One of the best things that I did as a hiring manager, though, was to bring those that would be working with this individual into the hiring process so that they would get to know this person and they would be able to assess their skill set far better than I could. And I think that's one thing to learn or to understand as a manager is learning to trust those people that you work with and their skill set and be willing to rely on them for help in what you're trying to do and as you build out an organization.
And that growth mindset that you're talking about, right? That desire to continue to learn, you've obviously had to leverage it, whether you were born with it or not. You've grown a lot, and you've had to push yourself to learn. Is that something that you've had to cultivate, or is that always just kind of come natural to you? Are you somebody that's always taking things apart, very curious, or is it something that you've had to push through and kind of figure out how to find the desire to grow? Because sometimes that motivation can be hard.
Yeah, I think I grew up in the 80s as a kid, and it just felt like during the 80s, anything was possible. There was just the space shuttle program and just all kinds of amazing things happening. The computers were coming into mainstream, just lots of amazing things. So I always felt like um, just anything was really possible. But yeah, I took many things apart, much to my dad's chagrin. A lot of things didn't end up back together in working condition, but I was always curious and wanted to understand how things worked. I hooked up a 300 baud modem to my Atari 800 and figured out how to call into the University of Utah's bulletin board system and all kinds of stuff like that. That I just wanted to understand how things worked, and just I loved doing that kind of stuff.
Interesting. And that's a point that I'd like to make here, which is it sounds like you've had a natural aptitude towards engineering for a long time, ever since you were young. And that's actually one of the values I see in a more formal education path is maybe somebody doesn't realize that they have that aptitude until they take a college class, and that opens that door to them. Where I would challenge the more traditional model is once you find out that you have that aptitude, you could pursue an alternative education path. Or a great tool that I've used in the past and continue to use is Udemy, where if I think maybe I want to try to learn how to develop a mobile app, well, before sinking $800 for a class at a university, I can go on to Udemy and I can say, oh, here is a $15 course that teaches me how to create a mobile app. And within a few hours of taking that course, I realized, this isn't actually as interesting as I thought it was. And so I think some people like yourself, you discover that aptitude at a young age to the point where you're doing these projects on your own, building these, to me, very impressive sounding systems, doing pretty technical things. Some people might look at that and say, oh, well, he's a natural, right? He just knows how to do that. But what they don't see is the constant learning, the constant failure, all before the success. So I'm curious, do you look at yourself as a natural at computer programming and engineering, or do you see
No.
more of the process? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, definitely not a natural. When I was first learning as an intern at Strata, it was hard. And I think one of the things that really helped me was I didn't give up when I didn't understand something. I would go home after work and have some dinner, and then I'd jump back on the computer and try to figure out the thing that I was struggling with at work so that the next day I could be more productive. And that happened a lot, especially starting out. But yeah, always learning in this field. And it definitely never felt like a natural or felt like a software genius. It's just something that I enjoy doing. And I enjoy the creation aspect of software development, and the learning that's required to be able to do that. So yeah, it's a long road, and you got to be willing to put in the work. I feel like in order to be successful at it.
Consistent effort over time.
Yeah, for sure.
So sounds like one of the challenges we've talked about quite a bit at this point is the continual learning, especially in such a technical position such as software development. What has been the biggest challenge since you stopped going to college, since you started your career? Whether that's feeling intimidated by others that maybe have more degrees, or if it's a specific job that you had, feelings of self-doubt. I know for me, that was a big one when I dropped out, because I thought, okay, I've got all this freedom, but I've also got all this freedom, and I've had all this structure my whole life. So now what? So what's been one of the biggest challenges for you since dropping out, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think that self-doubt is definitely something that anybody that is jumping into a technical level career where other people do have bachelor's or even a master's in that area. But just being able to put that aside and being able to be humble and willing to ask questions. And again, don't give up when you don't understand how something works. Put in the extra time and try to figure it out. I think the biggest challenge I ran into is when I was working full time at a company, and I had a friend of mine ask me if I wanted to help him start up a new company and build some software for that company. And he wanted me to help build the iOS app that the users would be using from this company. And I had no idea how to do that. I bought some books and read through them and did all the examples, and I figured it out. And just by putting in the time, and that was difficult because I was working full time as well, and just doing that at night. But it was awesome. I learned so much, and I really enjoyed mobile development, even though you didn't. I loved it. And just I just had to put in the time to figure it out. And it took longer than we wanted, of course, to get the whole project done because we were moonlighting the whole thing. but we did it. We were able to launch the company, launch the software. It's still being used today. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but when you have 10-year-old mobile software running, that's pretty crazy. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest challenges that I had, as far as just needing to grow outside of my normal work efforts at work.
I can tell you now that that is extremely hard. Having done one Udemy course, well, a fraction of a Udemy course, I can't even imagine reading a book and trying to code a mobile application based solely on books. That's next level. I think though something that you're saying here, which is the time component, oftentimes, and I think I had this thought maybe when I first stopped going to college was, oh, I'll just take these shortcuts. I'll do X, Y, and Z, and I'll become filthy rich, and I'll never have to work a day in my life again, which hasn't been my experience. I think that's the rare experience. When it comes to a skill, though, like software development, one of the benefits of a traditional degree, bachelor's, master's programs, is it gives you a time box to focus your study on certain areas of a skill or trade, like software development. But one of the advantages that I've seen from stopping my college education, finding alternative education, and jumping into the job market sooner is that there's actually ways that you can find to get paid to learn, as opposed to paying other people to teach you. And part of that is just being willing to grind, being willing to do the extra work for free that maybe isn't being billed on your hourly rate, or you're not being paid to learn specifically. But if you can find a job like you did, where they were willing to let you learn on the job, they were willing to let you grow into that because you had shown a desire to learn, that to me can be an exponential benefit where you're learning the skill and trade, but you are also being paid, as opposed to learning the skill or trade, but paying somebody else, which sounds like you've been able to accomplish throughout your time after finishing college, more or less. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I've been really blessed to be at organizations that have allowed me to learn on the job, and but at the same time, me realizing I needed to put in extra time to measure up to what I needed to be able to accomplish in those positions. The company that I worked at before, where I mentioned I worked there for 15 years, one of the amazing things about that company is where I started and what I learned there, and their willingness to promote from within, as I was able to become a product owner and a software development manager, and learning how to be a manager and work with other individuals rather than being the guy typing on the keyboard writing the code. Just I feel like I've been really blessed to work at companies that allowed me to and took chances on me and allowed me to move up into those different positions that allowed me to grow.
Which I think is a good indicator of the relationships that you built. Obviously, there's that element of being blessed to it, the element of chance, who is in your life and what connections you have or don't have. But it's also, I think, a good barometer for people to assess, is where I'm at, are they giving me those opportunities? If not, that might be a good sign to look at other places. If you're really interested in growing, if you're really interested in pursuing something more, instead of letting them be a blocker, looking elsewhere for other opportunities that will allow you to grow and support you in that growth. Because from what you're saying, that's been one of the biggest keys to your journey, is having those people around you that have given you those opportunities.
Yeah, for sure.
So changing gears here a little bit, I appreciate you sharing that insight with us about your journey from stopping college to becoming a CTO at WetX. What has been the most impactful media in your professional life? That could be a book, could be a podcast, a TikTok influencer. I doubt that that's your most influential, but hey, there's some pretty interesting TikTokers out there. But yeah, any specific piece of media that's really changed the way you thought or view the world?
That's a good question. With it being specific to media, I would say the thing that's been most impactful for me, though, has been my mentors, the people that I work with. One of them I worked with at my previous company at Medici Ventures. He was great at helping us to utilize more like management level type books and learning how to become a better manager. And he was always great at just recommending different books, even things outside of management. I guess one book, or I guess that would count as media still, right? It was a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl that really had a big impact on me, on the experience that he had in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, and the meaning that he found in his life through that experience. That made a big impact on me. But another one was a work experience. When I first started working, I worked at this IT department, and I was back in the facilities area, and I was asked to organize the hardware shelves. They had all kinds of computer hardware. It was just totally messy, and things laying out all over the place. And it wasn't a fun job at all. I started, and I was still a teenager at the time, and I started organizing things, and I felt like, okay, this looks pretty good. And that manager came back, and he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Well, I'm done. Is this good enough?" That was a question I asked him, and he looked at me and said, "I don't know. Is it good enough?" And he just put that right back on me, and I looked at what I had done, and it wasn't good enough for me, and I realized that I needed to put more time in that, and that's had a big impact on me. That one little experience, and I constantly look at what I'm doing and ask that question of myself: is that really good enough, or do I need to put more time into it?
That sounds like a very wise manager and an amazing lesson to learn. That ability to ask yourself, am I proud of what I've done? Is
Mhm.
this my best work? Is it the right work? That's invaluable. And that book that you mentioned too, Man's Search for Meaning, it's one that I haven't read yet. I've talked to quite a few people that recommend it. Why was that so impactful to you, specifically in your professional career? Was it more of a personal, impactful book, or did that bleed into your professional life and how you saw your career?
I think it was both. I was in management at the time, and just the experiences that he had in that concentration camp, and what he did to survive was try to help other people. And that true meaning for him, the meaning of life for him, turned out to be love and loving others, and trying to help them to be successful too. So I feel like that was both personal and helped me in my career as well.
That's excellent. I think the buzzword terminology is servant leadership that you hear about nowadays from the management level. And I know you personally, and I can say that all my experiences have been very much in line with that. So I can tell that whoever's listening to this podcast, you're not just blowing smoke here. That it's actually impacted you in a very good way. And I've got to read the book. I definitely want to read it now.
It's good.
I think maybe one other book that's probably been pretty impactful is that one that you read about iOS development. Just guessing there. Sounds like that one was also a pretty important one. Do you remember what that one was called by chance? I'm curious. Was it?
Oh,
Because
I'd have to go look.
I tried reading like a Python book cover to cover, and I got a decent way through it. It had a rat on it and a snake and a python. But it was like a big old thick textbook, not a page turner.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a different learning style than watching a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Not to knock YouTube at all. I think you can learn pretty much anything on YouTube at this point. But that it just wasn't an option when I was doing those things. It just wasn't as popular, and just barely getting started at that point, I think. So
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look.
I'm curious too, because since you've been in tech since the 90s and now it's 2023, you've seen this incredible change in the way that people learn. How has that affected your ability to stay relevant? And are there any YouTubers or YouTube channels that you frequent, or is it typically just like myself, a YouTube search and whatever piece of code that person is writing on the screen, and if it works, hey, it works, and we're gonna go with that?
Yeah, I think the biggest tools that I use, there's no way I could keep up without being able to utilize Google effectively and to search and know how to put in the right search terms to find the answer, and being able to try different things to try to find the answer. I couldn't do it without Google. Stack Overflow is an amazing tool as well, where other people have asked questions and amazing smart people put in the time to answer those questions. I'm forever grateful for them. And one of the new amazing things that I see totally changing our industry is AI, like Chat GPT. I've been constantly impressed by what it can do, and I feel like people that know how to use AI will be able to advance more quickly than those that don't worry about it and keep with the more traditional learning methods. It's an amazing technology that's coming.
Any predictions with regards to AI? You're heavily involved in blockchain and technology. A tool like Chat GPT, how do you see it affecting the market? And even how do you see it affecting software development? I'm curious there.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I've seen how it can write code. You can ask it to create a function that does a specific thing, and it can spit it out. It's pretty amazing. So people are often concerned and feel like their job is going to be taken by AI. I don't think that's true. I think that other individuals that know how to use AI in their field are going to take their jobs, because they're going to be able to, like, going back to when I first started writing code, if I wanted to look something up, I had to either find it in a book, or there was this whole stack of CDs that I could load up and try to do a search, and it would have me put in a different CD to find the answer. But like comparing that to somebody that could just jump on Google and type in the same question, I think it's going to be very similar. Somebody that knows how to interface and utilize AI is going to be able to be just so much more productive at their job, and working in concert with the AI to produce what is desired by the company is going to be the future, I believe.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of posts on LinkedIn lately by AI thought leaders, and the recurring theme is that AI is not going to take your job, but people that know how to leverage AI as a tool might.
Yeah.
And it's the same as if you think about the early 20th century, somebody that was driving a horse-drawn carriage and getting people around, and then the invention of the car. The car didn't eliminate the horse-drawn carriage. It didn't take the job of the people driving the horse-drawn carriage, but somebody learns to drive the car, and all of a sudden they're transporting goods and people much more efficiently than that horse-drawn carriage and its driver. I think it's a very similar thing. It's just a tool, and the people that can learn how to use tools such as ChatGPT to enhance their workflow, enhance their professional output, they'll have an advantage. So this brings me to my final question. Again, thanks so much for your time so far. In one sentence, what's the most important lesson you've learned from dropping out, and why?
Good question. I think in one sentence, I would say stay humble and stay hungry and be willing to learn from anybody.
Well, that's it for this episode of Dedicated Dropouts. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more insights in the future. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, stay dedicated.